Hi and welcome back to Read No Grow. My name's Hayden and this week's video is more of a spooky themed fiction series, and I'm just gonna have a wee chat about a few books that I've read. Now I am a major wimp and I just don't do scary. Like, scary films stay with me for days and I have to sleep with the light on. I'm a total wimp. Harry Potter and the Dementors scared me for weeks, so that is how much of a wimp I am. So these books are kind of like spooky themed, but they're definitely not like horror books. So if you know any of these kind of books, then like recommend them down in the comments below, because I do enjoy these kind of books with a spooky element, but not like full-blown horror scary films kind of books. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Circe, which I have spoken about before, and I'll show like the little video thumbnail here. But I love this book and it's got sort of witchy vibes. So Circe is sort of set in the Greek heroic god sort of era. So her father is Helios, the god of the sun, and her mother is an oceanic nymph. And her siblings and all of her other relatives have either got powers or beauty, and she's considered to have neither of these. So she's considered sort of the runt of the litter. If you kind of think Encanto vibes, she's sort of the one family member who doesn't seem to possess sort of any real power. However, eventually she develops a natural ability for casting spells and witchcraft, which deeply angers her father, and he exiles her to an isolated island. She uses this time on the island to hone her witchcraft skills, and she eventually encounters mortals and gods, and the story develops and she basically has to make a really difficult decision in the end, whether she wants to go back to the gods that she grew up with or stay with the mortals who she's learned to love. And I really enjoyed this book. I loved like all the Greek mythology thrown in, you know, like the Minotaur, Jason and the Argonauts, all the things that you've kind of heard in the past, maybe when you were doing like history at school and things like that, but also the magic element in it as well, the witchcraft sort of side of things, and the descriptions. And if you just really want to just have a whole bit of escapism, I really would recommend this book. And the second book is called The Book Thief. Now I read this book years ago, but it's one of those books that's always stayed with me, and I think it's kind of stayed with me in like a haunting way because it's narrated by death. And you would think because a book's narrated by death it would maybe be a bit somber, maybe a bit scary, but it's really not like that. Death is actually portrayed as a really curious and very patient character in this book, and basically Death follows the story of a little girl called Liesel who is sent away from her mum because her mum can't afford to look after her to a foster family in WW2 Nazi Germany. And the book starts off with Liesel stealing a book, and that's why she's called the Book Thief. And Death has always been very intrigued by her and follows her around and keeps bumping into her because some of the loved ones who pass, Death has to then collect their souls. So he kind of like checks in on her at these times. And I don't know if it's just because it was just something so different that I've read because it was narrated by Death, and I always love that era, sort of World War II, and a lot of the book is also from the little girl's perspective as well in that sort of era too. And it was also made into a film, and I did really enjoy the film's adaptation as well. And the next book I'm going to talk about is called Sabriel, and it's part of a series called The Old Kingdom by Gareth Nix. And I think I've read the first 4 of these books, and I believe there's 6 now, and I really enjoyed these books. So these books have a bit of necromancy, a bit of the undead and magic, and I didn't find these books scary. There is a bit of like undead scariness and things, but I didn't really find them like a horror book or anything like that. It was just something a bit different to anything I had ever read, and I really enjoyed these books. And basically there's 2 different kingdoms, the Old Kingdom and then sort of a more sort of modern kingdom, like the 20th century era kingdom. And Sabriel, who's like a young girl at this point, is going to school, trying to just live kind of a normal life. And her dad is actually a necromancer who puts the undead back to death, lays them back to rest. And in the Old Kingdom, there's rumours of chartered magic, free magic, that the sort of modern sort of kingdom don't really have anything to do with, and they kind of like ignore that sort of side of things. But Sabriel's father is the necromancer who is in charge of putting these undead back to rest. And he does this with a series of bells that can ring and send the dead back to like the deeper gates of death. And when the royal family dies, there's a lot of unrest and the undead seem to be increasing in numbers. and Sabriel gets a message from her dad that he's actually trapped in the gates of death. And now it's her opportunity or her responsibility to use those bells that her dad sent to get her dad back into the realm of the living, and also to try and keep the dead. So that wraps up this week's video, guys. So if you can recommend any books like this, sort of spooky vibes, like anything like witchy, I've not really read that many witchy books, but you know, like something like the Salem Sisters, you know, Hocus Pocus vibes, like practical magic, that kind of vibe. If anything like that, I'd love it if you could recommend sort of for this kind of season. And as always, if you comment below, I'll send someone a copy of this week's book. Now, I haven't decided which one I would send, so if you comment below and then suggest which book you would like, then I'll send you a copy of that book. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye. Good evening and welcome to So Circe is set in the times of sort of the Greek gods, and Sabriel's at school, and she doesn't really like. We're sort of talking to. Hi and welcome back to. Hi and welcome back to. Hi. What's with the shoulders?